amigos, mi nombre completo es Juan Nicolás Jodal Mateo. Cuando tengo algún tema...
My full name is Nicolás Jodal Mateo. When I have an issue to discuss that is not so specific for the community, I adopt the personality of Juan Mateo. Juan Mateo has no Twitter, by the way. What I would like to mention today, we have just listened to the presentations by Carriquiri and Milano, and also Armina Rodrigo about the personal applications or final consumer applications. We started working last year on this issue, and I felt I myself have never made an application for a final consumer, and I devoted some time to make an application for the final consumer, and I call it Pesobok. It was a sort of a joke as compared to Facebook. What I did is an application with a web interface that works normally as a web application, but it's also for smart devices, for Android and for iOS, and intend to have it in a short time for BlackBerry as well. And I did it because I want to learn how it works. And as I learned a lot of things. And perhaps I could make a presentation of that, but I don't want to talk about the application itself today, but the things I learned while I was doing the application. These are the things that were useful to me or draw my attention. The areas I'm going to mention is look and feel, security, the knowledge base of GeneXus, and what happened when I intended to upload these applications to the stores and in the marketing. The first thing, the look and feel about a web application is the number of images available. An application for smart devices requires a lot of icons. It's a rather simple application, has 106 images specifically for the smart devices. There is a lot of icons that must be included, and otherwise the application is has not a good look. That's the bad news, but the good news is that most are similar icons. Actually, you require the same icon but with a different size or a different format. An example. The main icon in the application, if I wish to apply it to Apple, it must be 57 by 57, but in the case of Android, it should be 72 by 72. As you see, it's not the same balance, but because the Android change of version icons must be flat, not inclined, and therefore what I mean is that there are a lot of icons. If you're going to make an application for smart devices, you better get prepared because you have a lot of icons that are essential and must be there. The tips I recommend here is to work with an experienced graphic designer. Second, show that person an article in Wikipedia. For the present, now it's in Spanish, but we're going to publish it in English as well. It's called Images for Smart Devices Applications. There will also be a presentation by Marina Carriquiri, who was the designer who helped me in presenting Pesobok. I think it's tomorrow 10:30 in 2B. And look and feel, the most important is to work with an experienced graphic designer. That is the main point. As Armin said today, you need themes to make the application look nice. I have two similar themes, one for Android and another one for iOS. Now the same classes, but the values are totally different. For instance, if I like to show you the size of a peso in a large image, I must have a value for Android and a different value for iOS. So you need both themes, the same class, but with different values for each application. User controls are also very important. You should use them to a large extent because they facilitate things. For instance, to enter body weight, the most important is to enter the weight. And you should also avoid to open the keyboard. If somebody must click on a certain value, the advantage get lost. So you have to use user control. I use a little wheel where the value of the weight is, so you can move it with the wheel. So when I made this application, Jorge Poleri, that is one of my first users, he'll tell you later about this experience. I had entered a default value of 80 kilos, so those who were under that weight were moving up and down. All those details really mattered at the time of making the application, so digitation becomes easier. To open the keyboard is not very good. Another business user control that I use, I wanted to show the rate of body mass and also to indicate whether the figure is normal or not. This is typical of any medical value, as in cholesterol, for instance. This is a very common value. This control is available for smart devices and web. So you can use the same SDT for both functions, and it works perfectly. Another user control that I used was graphics, how to show the graphics, whether it goes up or down. The control is totally different, but it has the same structure of the SDT that we use in the web. It uses the same logic that in the web, and also for the smart devices. This is available for iOS, Android, and on Beta 4 we have the graphics of Android, and I intended to upload it here. The other component that was difficult for me to understand because I didn't realize what was their use was the layout. This is the situation when you design for smart devices, you find different kinds of situations. A phone is not the same as tablet. Android is not the same as Apple. So you know the logic, the rationale of what you intend to do, body weight, body mass, and the graph. But in each one of the devices, how to do it is different. The way to do it. I have the same logic, but I have to include it in each one of the devices in a different manner. So, we did to have the logic on one side and the colors and the layout on the other. This is the work with of the persons, of the individuals, which is essential in the Pesobok. And inside the circle is the logic of the components that we wish to show. But in the layout, at the bottom of the page, here you have the layout components. I have one for iOS, one for iPhone, and one for iPad. To modify the layout, you just shift boxes from places. This system facilitated facilitated things for me when I wanted to make specific things for each one of the devices. As I said, I have any platform, iPhone or iPad. Another experience that surprised me was that it was far more difficult to make the application from the design point of view for the iPod than for the phones, because the more extended the space is, the most difficult it becomes. When I have to do it in a phone, the space is very small, but in an iPod we have to know how to fill a more extended place, and for an engineer this becomes more difficult. Some tips about each one of them. In the case of phones, the most important tip was the number of tabs I can include. My recommendation is to use 5 tabs, because otherwise everything is too tight and too crowded and becomes difficult. But as I said, it's far more complicated in the area of tablets. And let me show my own example. The application I can download in Apple Store now is this. This is what I designed as an engineer. When I had the main screen, I said, well, this is the information I want to include, the weight, the variation through the year, and I included them in this way. I was rather happy. When I talked with Marines, she told me, no, this is awful, and she sent me this one. This is what I didn't yet, and what I intend to do after the event. In the phone I had nothing to do, to include data, and that was all, but in the tablet this is more similar to a web application, and you have to work more in the design. The logic remains unchanged, but the way how I organize the boxes is more complex. The tips to close the look and feel. First, to start with functionality. What I did was to define what I wanted to include, body mass, variation, etc. So I'll start with that. Then start with layouts for phones, because it's easier, so you better start trying things on the phones. Then the icons. Everything that could have an icon should have an icon. The main application, each one of the tabs, each one of the menu options, everything must have an option, because otherwise it looks ugly. And only after this you face the more difficult step, that is the layout for tablet. This is my recommendation for look and feel, and above all, find a graphic designer to help you to have a nice application.
In terms of security, when you have the application in smart devices, what you'll have is one server-side component which has one interface, and then another part with a mobile device, unless you want to make a sort of read-only application. So you usually will update data by having first a mechanism of authorization and authentication, and second, you want data to be safe and to be protected in the sense that no one unauthorized can access the data. There, my recommendation is quite simple. Use the GAM, which is the GeneXus Access Manager. It's easy to use. You just have to tick it. And from then on, it does everything we need to do in order to be protected so that no one can attack us. And it also covers authentication and authorizations. My recommendations regarding the use of GAM, the GAM, it also has a series of examples. Don't change those examples.